Welcome to Unshakeable Being, the podcast with inspiration and practical tools for purpose-led leaders like you to relieve stress, build resilience, and unlock vitality in your life, body, and business. I am Dr. Heather Clark, and I'll be your host. Hello, and welcome back to the show. Today we have on Adena Sampson. She is the founder of Out Loud Productions and the Unbreakable Spirit Movement, and is a breakthrough coach, inspirational speaker, singer-songwriter, and best-selling author. Having overcome the insurmountable, Adena leads by example, teaching us how to turn challenges into victories and inspiring us to live a more authentic, courageous, and passionate life. Adena, welcome to the show.
Heather, thank you so much for having me. So it's such a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you on. You are delightful. Listeners, we have been chatting for a few minutes before, and I am so excited about this. So excited. And in fact, so excited it's difficult for me to choose a first question. So let's start with, Adena, here we are mid-pandemic, where a lot of people are feeling like we're post-pandemic, but in fact, we're not.
Yes.
I would love for you to just kind of take the bit in your teeth and run, because I want to hear how people can help shift their perspective with this, how they can surrender and accept what is, and how to do so in a way that shifts them out of stress and builds resilience.
Sure. And that's a great setup. So thank you so much, Heather. That's also a loaded question. I don't think,
right.
I think this is how I'm going to answer this first and foremost. There's no quick fix. There's no magic pill. Anything that we want to grow into and experience in our lives, we are going to have to take a moment to look within, look in the mirror and say, how am I showing up? How am I being part of the solution, part of the problem? What does this look like? Again, not always easy for a lot of us. And yet for those that are already on the path, for those that are maybe at a crossroads at their life, for those who are even dealing with the pandemic, there's a realization, I believe, at some point that says, hey, I would like this to be a different way. It's uncomfortable in the moment. What life is throwing at me is uncomfortable. Now, and realizing that we can't necessarily change what is being thrown at us, right? A lot of times I believe we see these as obstacles that we want to get around. We want to pretend that that's not there. Anything to avoid the uncomfortable feeling that it brings, rightfully so. However, the only way out is through. And I truly, truly believe that because of where I've been from my experience prior to the pandemic. It's not that my experience has been any harder than most during the pandemic. I just believe that because I've been through what I've been through, which we can talk about later on and get to that, I've had some extra tools on my belt, you should say, in my backpack that allows me to go, okay, this is uncomfortable. I've been here before. Let me take a step back. Let me realize what is in my control. I can't control what's being thrown at me, but I can control how I respond to it. Again, sounds like something we've heard before, not always easy to address, but it's breaking it down saying, okay, in this moment to acknowledge even what we're feeling. Yes, I'm feeling depressed. Yes, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Yes, I'm feeling anxious. These are things I don't believe are spoken about enough. We talk about it as if we have this hush-hush that maybe it's a mental illness. This is the way we describe it and wrap it up, which I think is incorrect. I think we can shift our perspective and say we all deal with this. We're just not talking about it enough. And how can we support each other in moving forward? And I think to also answer your question, I believe that people sometimes mistake resilience as maybe already somebody with confidence, or maybe that somehow you're born with it or you're not. And resilience is something that is wielded. Resilience is actually something that is wielded through the uncomfortable. So it's grace under pressure. It's learning how to navigate, how to be flexible with what life throws at you, no matter how uncomfortable. Because when it happens again, you're already then more well equipped. It's just a natural progression, as such. So I may not have given you specifics yet that we have broken down, but I really believe that when we look at adversity as an opportunity, what are the lessons to learn? Why are we here? What can I learn from this? Life, again, gets so much better. And also when we accept that we don't have control, that it's going to happen again. Instead of thinking that, okay, this will never happen again, we have to be really honest that yes, it will. And when it does, we're just better well equipped, or we get to practice this time around, and we're not going to get it right away. And it's not always going to be comfortable. And it's only that moment. The next moment is the future. The moment prior is the past. We're here now. If we can remain present with really what is in front of us, then the next moment comes, and we're not stuck in a stagnant place wondering how to navigate. So many people have lost loved ones, whether that be from death, unfortunately through the pandemic, whether that's been through a divorce, okay, whether that's an illness, you name it. And I think it's just important to realize that we're all in this together and to start from square one. We're here. We're still going through it. It's a matter of opinion maybe, but I think politics, everything needs to be pushed aside to realize we're all in this together. We are all being affected. How can we support each other? So I know that was a little bit long-winded, as you can tell. I'm extremely passionate about life and supporting everyone. So I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yes, beautifully. Thank you for that. Because it gives us a lot of different directions we can go. And first of all, I don't think that I've ever heard anybody talk about wielding resilience. I am in love with this idea.
Yes, great.
Because the whole adversity is an opportunity. Yes, that really goes along with my belief that everything is happening for you.
Yes.
I love talking about staying in the present. The only way out is through. Like, I love all of that. And could you give us some more tangible examples of ways that you suggest for people, or maybe you've done it yourself, to really begin to wield the resilience in a way that completely supports them wherever they're at?
Sure. Again, that really starts with acceptance. And I know that that's something that we may have a different definition on. When we say acceptance, in my mind, it's not necessarily that everything's going great or that we're okay with what is happening. I think it's really just making peace that it is happening, which was really hard for me for quite some time, especially because of my, let's say, type A personality, right? Some of us who may have a certain way we'd like to go about things, or there's a certain way we see things. A big part of when I've suffered from my severe chronic illness and my excruciating heartbreak, financial devastation. I mean, a lot of times we might go through one of these things at a time. I went through all three, and not just once, twice, but 3 times over. It was no matter how much I fought to not want to experience where it was, that's where I was. And the harder I fought, the worse it got. So for me, surrender wasn't so much giving up, because unfortunately we're taught too that surrendering and accepting what is, surrender is used in the context of war, which means we wave a flag and we surrender. No. It's actually, the way I see it, is pure strength. It's not giving up. It's giving over. It's giving in. It's saying that maybe the way I see it is not the way it's supposed to be. And like you said, if everything happens for a reason, then it's our job just to figure out, what is that reason? What's our purpose? How have we come to serve? What are we learning from this moment, even in the pain, in the chronic pain, which makes it even harder, because if you're experiencing any type of chronic pain, you get into this cycle that you can't get out of, and it's the worst in the world. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. And the way I got out of it was one step at a time, was one little thing at a time, was one moment at a time. In this moment, this is where I'm at. This is how I'm feeling. How can I shift my perspective? And I think, let me give you a tangible example. So let's talk about the present moment. A lot of times it's easy for us to be so distracted in this society that is just nonstop, go, go, go. And if we don't go, what does that mean? We place meaning on what we believe success is, which is also another place we need to start, right? My number one principle in the book is shift your perspective, because I had to shift my perspective in what I thought success was, to realize that success is so much more than what we've defined it to be. Okay. I even have a story at some point. I can tell that there was a huge aha moment for me years ago where I realized that my smile made somebody's day. And that sounds kind of, small thing, but I was not well. I wasn't able to do the work that I was there to do. I wasn't able to speak. I wasn't able to put my words together. And I was doing something that, at the time I was judging, right? That wasn't good enough. And I had Strangers on the street remind me that just a smile could make someone's day, that it made their day, that in that moment I was doing God's work. In that moment, the universe was saying, hey, this is it. This is success. Everything else that you thought was not necessary. So I began to really break things down into moment to moment. This is where I'm at. If I got up and I was able to get outside, that was a good day, right? It was the littlest thing. If I'm there being present with Heather right now, I'm here with Heather because I don't have this moment again. If I'm in my own way, I need to sit there and wash the dishes, take a shower, do the laundry, do something else where I can be mindful just in the mundane, basic tasks, which have really helped me. So I'm not thinking about any other, even when my mind is wandering in those tasks, I'm focusing back to the task at hand. I'm washing the dishes. I'm doing the laundry to give my mind a break of all the stuff that is really, I think gets in our way, right? The stuff that is really just filling up the space instead of being present in the moment to realize, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm doing, and this is going to help me move forward. So I hope that that's helpful in some way, shape, or form. I've broken it down quite a bit in the book and just not always easy to do here.
No, that's beautiful. And I love how that dovetails so elegantly, because that's essentially how to shift out of stress. Stress is all about perception.
Yes.
And if you can shift your perspective, you necessarily shift your perception. And so many times the stress at that point simply evaporates. And you get to see, oh, here is the value I'm putting on this. Here's the valence. I'm valencing this negative, like I'm making this experience negative when in fact, what if it's simply an experience? What if I'm moving through it? Oh, and I notice I'm not enjoying it. Great.
Right. And actually, like you said, it's a choice, isn't it? Really what you're saying is it is a choice in every moment. And I think that's a big part of what I like you said, express on multiple levels. It's not that it won't happen. It will. Now, when it does, you have a choice. And the next moment's the next moment. So even the next moment, you can make a different choice. It's okay. And I think that really alleviates the pressure too, that there is no perfection. You're not going to get it right away. You can practice. It's okay. And as you practice like anything else, it's going to get easier. You're going to be able to choose a lot more, how to shift your perspective in these moments a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm dying to know, what is your origin story? How did you come to be doing this work? How did you come to write your book? Tell us all about that.
Sure. And I love that you said origin story. It's something I've used too in the book, really just under a chapter called Embrace Your Vulnerability as one of the principles, because I also believe that's a big thing that we sometimes lack right now in society is the vulnerability, the like the surrender. We think it's a weakness when in fact it's the very thing that is actually a thread that connects all of us. As such an isolated society right now, is so much that is we are divided by. It's the one thing that actually builds trust, builds relationship, is the embracing the vulnerability. And I bring that back to the origin story as such as that, for example, my whole life, and I get to share this, which is vulnerable for me, but I thank you for this opportunity. I was told I was too sensitive. You're so sensitive. Oh, don't take things so personally, right? Now, as I grew up as a child, like many of us do, we hear things, we take it on. And again, it's not our fault. It's not even our parents' fault. Okay. We grow up, we pass down so many traits beyond physical. We pass down our belief systems, right? And not just with the familial, but also through schooling, you name it. So a lot of times we pick up things that aren't the truth. Let's talk about what the truth is. We are good enough. We just, unfortunately, most of us grow up taking on things that weren't ours to begin with. And then having it be, unfortunately, a bit of an identity crisis that we have to work through. So mine was, I'm too sensitive, and somehow that's a problem. I'm too intense. Oh, you're so intense, right? Well, when I finally was able to reclaim those pieces and say, hey, yes, I am. I'm owning this because this is my superpower. You talked about, origin story, kryptonite. We talk about it as what we see in these, superhero stories. And it's great because each story has this beginning, middle, and end, and something that this character has gone through. So what I went through was, one, realizing I had to really go back to understanding what my beliefs were, what I was carrying around in my adulthood that no longer served me from childhood. Although a big part of that was that I got severely ill. I got extremely sick. Probably because I was seeking validation outside myself in some way, shape, or form. Because I thought my sensitivity maybe was a curse instead of a gift. So it was a journey. I went on this journey to actually come back to reclaiming the very power that I did not know I was giving away. Even with some of our personalities, for me, it was very subtle. How was I giving it away? I had no idea I even had some codependency issues, okay? I was not aware of this. So my journey, first and foremost, was getting extremely ill, but not just with something that the doctors could say, this is what you have and this is what we're going to do. I was misdiagnosed for 5 years before I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, which still the CDC doesn't fully recognize. There's some controversy out there, okay? And I say that in the best light. I absolutely believe that Western medicine is doing what it's doing, and especially in times like these where we absolutely need it and it's critical. And I also believe that there are people like myself, let's just say deemed mystery illness, autoimmune issues, okay? Very much like the COVID long haulers. We're seeing this cytokine storm, right? What is that? That's your immune system going haywire, right? And for many of us who have suffered with lupus, MS, chronic Lyme disease, you name it, we have dealt with this chronic inflammation and cytokine storm long before COVID came to pass. So I say this because this is a big part of also why I'm here now. I thought I had missed my boat, Heather. I thought that because I was so sick in bed watching my life go by while everyone else was living theirs, that maybe I'd missed my boat. Maybe what I thought was to be, Heather, was not supposed to be. And how did I make peace with that within myself? How did I continue to work when I was unable to work? When cognitively, I couldn't put my words together. And as you can see, I can speak, very well with you right now. I couldn't put my words together. I had full fevers, full migraines, constant, 24/7 pain that I would never, ever wish upon anyone. That wasn't just physical, because it became a PTSD. It became, it's all in your head. How many doctors I went to that pretty much didn't have to say it. You could tell they were saying it. Family members, people who I love and who didn't know any better. And it's not their fault, but they are literally looking at me like, well, where's your proof? Why do your tests say this and you are experiencing this? So that's a big part of my journey and what that was like for me to take back my power and realize that nobody outside of me was going to give me the love that I was seeking, because I wasn't even realizing I was seeking it. And that in order for me to heal, it wasn't that I created that I got Lyme disease. Of course, that was something that was external, then went internal. But my makeup, my emotional aspects to how I grew up and what it is I felt maybe I was looking for showed up in my relationships. I've had a lot of dysfunctional relationships. That's an honest thing. And I was working that out through, okay, this is what I knew of love. And this is now what I'm recreating. And this is also keeping me sick, right? In these relationships and the dynamics that no longer serve me. So when you ask how it is I've got to where it is I am today, it's been a 12-year journey fighting for my life, trying to figure out where I belong and how to show up, and having to put aside the very work that I loved to do because I wasn't able to do it. Music saved my life. I've also been blessed to have that as a coping mechanism, something that I had an outlet for when I was a kid. And thank goodness, because when I couldn't work, all I could do was say, I got to get back into music. Slept all day, went and performed. Nobody would have had any clue. And the only time I wasn't in pain was for those 3 to 4 hours while I was on stage, almost like an altered state, where I was channeling. And again, the only way out is through. I really believe a big part of the coaching, the speaking, the writing, the singing, it's the same element. It's my voice, right? I'm realizing that my unique ability and my gift is to express, whether that's through writing, speaking, singing, that I was sitting there doing and being on purpose in a time and place where I didn't plan this. I didn't plan any of even getting back into music. And what has brought me here is the ability to express this. The fact that I'm even as well as I am today was partly because the pandemic came along and I was able to tell my story that has been boxed up for so long inside of me, not for any other reason, but to let other people know that you are not alone, whatever you're going through right now. Okay, however you're experiencing it right now, you're not alone. I've been there. Here's how I've done it. Here's how I've gotten myself out of it. Here's where I'm still at, meaning it's still a daily practice. I will not claim, expert or not, that I do not still deal with these decisions and choices daily, because I do. And so I guess when I say I thought I missed my boat, the pandemic came along and I realized, no, I didn't miss my boat. This is why I came. This is why so many of us came. Now I can sit here and say that everything has not been for naught. And I can sit here and support others to realize that they can too, that their origin story, what is their superpower? Okay, what is my sensitivity is my superpower, my empathy, my ability to feel for others so I can express and support them and to break through these limiting beliefs, right? To say, this is who you are. This is your authentic self. Let that shine through. No more masks, no more trying to be somebody you're not. Be who it is you are. And let everything else fall away. So it's not so much, the work I do is not so much what we're going to add on, but really what we're clearing away and making room for so the true you can shine. And before I end this, I know it's another long-winded, I have to say, most of us get stuck there because there is a fear. If I change, or if let's rephrase that, if I am who I am, which is what I thought wasn't accepted, then I'll lose the people I love, the people around me. And yes, you may. And many times it must happen, uncomfortable as it is, because then you're able to seriously and truly reflect the vibration of who it is that you are to be met. So a big part of my underlying issue too was I believed I was never going to be met. And then I kept attracting circumstances and people that could never meet me until I realized, whoa. Now I expect to be met, not from an ego place, from a place of, I know my worth. I know it is who I am, the beauty of my uniqueness that makes me me and all my quirkiness. and this is it. Take it or leave it, like it or not, and that's okay. And I really, really work with people so they can understand who their authentic self is, because it's not that they don't have it. It's innate within each and every one of us. It's about tapping into and tuning into that and just building upon that every moment of every day, including during this pandemic. Again, it's not easy, but it is absolutely worth it for anyone that's willing to go on the journey.
So I think we're soul sisters. I love that so much. Like when I got sick, mine was extreme adrenal fatigue. Yours is chronic Lyme disease. Someone else's is some other autoimmune thing. Like our stories, I am so struck with how there's so many features of your story and my story that are very similar, and how many people out there are hearing, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. Like, thanks Western medicine, you're not equipped for this. And, oh, really the underlying issue was some denial of some part of my essential nature.
Absolutely.
And the way to come out of it is to simply embrace it. I love it. One of the things I think is really interesting that came to me as you were sharing is when we have these superpowers, and I believe that everybody has at least one superpower, but what I'm struck with, it seems like the way you found yours was the way a lot of people tend to find it. And that isn't by like, oh, great, I've got this superpower and that's amazing. It's more, what is creating the biggest issue for me? What is society or the people around me making most wrong? And it sounds like one of the things that was up for you was your sensitivity. Like, you're too sensitive, because I have heard that before. So many people listening to this have heard that before. Well, really it means many other things, but often it's, oh, you're highly intuitive. You're really tuned in. And that's simply creating discomfort for someone else. So they wanted to make you wrong about it.
Absolutely.
And I just think that's a really curious way. And I wonder, the people you work with, is that how they're really finding their superpowers? Or do they have a different entree into that? Or,
I think there's a little bit of a mix, although that's a big part of what I walk people through as far as an exercise, even through that piece in the book, mainly because this is the way I found mine, in a way that is not necessarily glaring at you, right? And if it is, it's just because, again, we haven't shifted our perspective enough to realize, wait a second, just because we're being told that something is uncomfortable for someone else doesn't mean that that is uncomfortable or wrong for me. And we're trying to mold into something that we're not, which is part of the problem to begin with. And I think we do that overall on a blanketed level because our biology, our innate biology, is to belong, right? That's something key and imperative. And so I think that even the strongest of us, with the strongest of personalities, who maybe don't go with the grain or might have a rebellious streak, we'll still find that there's this subtle underlying issue that we have bought into, this belief. And again, people are saying this, I don't believe to be mean. It's just because they're uncomfortable, because we're not taught to really sit with our feelings. We're really not taught this in school. We're not taught how to love ourselves. You hear that all the time. What does that mean? Just love yourself. Well, there's one thing to have an awareness of just love yourself, and then to fully embody what that means, which means practicing self-care strategies and methods, speaking up for yourself when you know people are going to maybe not listen, not like it, especially those close to you. Setting boundaries, which is also a big part of what I was lacking, is, hey, okay, I'm going to see this as a superpower, not to just make me feel better, because when you realize that that is how important your intuition is, how many times I knew and I saw the red flags, but I ignored my intuition, that's on me. And when we realize that that's a gift, that I always knew it, but I was second guessing myself, I was learning how to trust myself first before I can actually place trust in another. It's more really trusting yourself as to the decisions you make. And so I think that's a really key, phrase is, yes, I find that a lot of people have a superpower that doesn't look the way they think it should. And that's the whole point. It's not a should. It just is what it is. And we have to make peace with that and go, okay, what are the benefits here? How has this served me in my life? And when we really look at that, it's amazing how that almost shifts our perspective instantly, because we are able to see the gift alongside what we think the curse is, and then be able to make peace with it inside of ourselves enough to be more authentic and practice that daily. And then have people around us go, yeah, like, that's why I love you. When you ask people, and that's a part of the exercise I ask people to do, is when you do like a market research and you give, people a call that you've known in business, that you've known in relationships, people that you can ask for an unbiased opinion because they will literally tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not. There's a theme there. There's a theme that everybody will say. You can read people. You walk into a room and you can read people. You're so empathic. They will say the same things. And that's also a major sign that says that is your superpower. That's what everybody loves you for. But nobody tells you, because normally we don't ask, and we normally don't do this for our fellow friends until we say, hey, this would really help me. I'm working with a coach, or I'm working with somebody, and I would love to know the truth of what it is you feel about how I show up in the world. And that's important, because once we hear it, we're almost blown away, and then we get to go, this is the way people see me, not the way I think or project that people see me. And we get to really accept that as, oh my God, look at that love. Like, yes. And that helps build the strength and resilience moving forward. Whenever we're met with adversity or someone that thinks otherwise, let them think otherwise, because you're being true to you.
And that puts that in that new perspective, because being able to read a room, such a powerful gift, so amazing, can be so helpful. And the shadow side, if you're not using it consciously, as I'm imagining this, you'd be able to kind of sense what other people are feeling. If somebody is feeling like, they didn't want me to show up like that, without the clarity, without the consciousness around it, would be easy to draw the conclusion, I am wrong. I am doing something wrong. I am because you can kind of feel and sense what people are thinking around you. But with this, it's that flip side of, okay, well, I can just read a room and that's their opinion and that's fine. It just kind of gives you that more stable foundation to where you're not pulled off center by all these things you're picking up. You're like, okay, well, what's the truth? What's true for me? And how do I choose to respond? That's something I've heard you say several times. Like, how do you choose to respond? Yes. How do you choose to see it?
Instead of being reactive, which is very easy for those of us that are also sensitive. And as an artist, as somebody who, has a lot of emotions. It's not the emotions that are the problem. Our emotions are actually wonderful way showers. It's a map. It's literally like a GPS that says, hey, pay attention to me. And I think when we start paying attention instead of ignoring it like we're taught to, we realize again that our emotions are the gift. And it's just that it's easy to, as an empath or a sensitive, to go that direction, especially when we feel others. That's something I've done my whole life. And a lot of times, even if you are, a sensitive yourself, you'll notice the people you're in relationship with. I've always had to say, hey, I will always know. And I can't help that. And a lot of times people can't stand it because before they do. Okay, that's the truth. And it doesn't make it right or wrong or indifferent. We all have our gifts. It just looks different. And, not everybody is going to have this gift, and that's okay, but they might have a completely different gift that we don't have. And that's the whole point, isn't it? Because we're here to co-create and be around one another. But I think you're right. The shadow self, I'd like to address some of that, because that's also a lot of the work I do. And when we say shadow self, I'm sure your audience understands, but what we're really talking about is that negative side, or what we think is negative, what we think is just our anger. Let's talk about that. That would be considered sometimes, I think to some of the new age community, a negative. I disagree. And I say
I'm
that,
right there with you.
Right? Because here's the thing, we are now stopping the one thing that is, again, a way shower saying, I'm angry. There's a reason why you're angry, irrelevant of what we think the truth is or not. There's a reason. It could be for your protective mechanism from when you were a kid. There's something that you're sensing, your fight or flight, that's keeping you in that space. Sometimes you're right. We are definitely creating it ourselves. If we're not well, when you're not well, you have a tendency to react in certain ways that are out of your control. That is a truth for a lot of illness, chronic illness, patients. But I say that it's a benefit, because I had to make peace with that. I had to realize and ask myself, why am I angry? I was really angry at myself, you see. It wasn't so much outside of me. It was because I wasn't trusting myself, because of mistakes I made that really, I don't believe there are any mistakes anymore either. If we can make peace with realizing everything happens for a reason, and we're just learning, then we can address that. And I don't think that it's wrong for us to be ashamed of our anger, as long as we are, again, some of us, we have to make sure that we're not taking it out necessarily in a negative way towards someone else. We have to realize there's a reason for this, and sometimes an absolute necessity for it. And so for anyone to, again, disengage with that piece of themselves and thinking that that's somehow a spiritual path, I would just ask that maybe there's some, maybe we could relook at that or shift our perspective on that, because there's so much to be gained and learned from anger in itself as the emotion, as to what we're feeling and why, and how that can serve us moving forward.
I completely agree with that. And in fact, that's a huge spiritual bypass to be like, well, I'm just not angry. The people that are actively choosing to cut themselves off from their anger. And I just there's no benefit to that. Certainly feeling anger, experiencing anger is different than acting from anger.
That is true.
It's different than acting out. But and one of the things that I do is I help people, and it sounds like it's real similar. One of the things is to help people really get in touch with, what are you not feeling? What have you cut off? And anger often feels really dangerous.
Yes.
And a great question is, from when you think back to your childhood, who is it that was inconvenienced by your anger?
That is so good that you said that, because then it keeps showing up again in our relationships now. And until you accept that, though, once you accept it, you don't tend to have that reflect back anymore, because you tend to then attract people who are also at peace with their anger, meaning they don't reject it as much. Yes, that is so well done. Yes, exactly. Inconvenienced by it, but because of what reason?
Yeah. And it's usually, I'm just calling back. One of my favorite books is Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren. It's magical. It's amazing. Listeners, if you haven't gotten it, I highly recommend it. And I agree with her perspective that anger is actually a signal to reestablish a boundary.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why when people recover from burnout, once you're able to get angry, we're off to the races, man. That's everything gets a lot easier, because multiple reasons. Number one, you've stopped freezing that emotion. So you've got that energy again, but also it's helping people reestablish the boundaries.
Right.
And especially a boundary of, no, this is who I really am. And that's beautiful and divinely perfect. Feel about it how you want to. And I just love this.
It's so true. Boundaries are key. Again, a big part of what I didn't realize I didn't have. For those of us that care about others, we have a tendency to give our power away by not having strong boundaries in place. Again, sometimes it can come from people pleasing. Sometimes it's a lot more subtler than that. We don't even realize that's how we kind of grew up and how we are ingrained to respond to, whether we're dealing with narcissism or codependency or both, depending on whether or not we've had, interesting, aspects in our lives and roles that were played out that that kind of are developed for us when we're younger. Again, we're placed in a family dynamic. Sometimes we're the scapegoat. Sometimes we're the golden child. It depends on the familial aspect. But a lot of this is not our fault. However, it is our responsibility at some point when we realize that maybe we want life to look different, or maybe something's off, to look at, okay, we've got to go backwards to look at what took place, to shift our perspective and understand the beliefs that were ingrained, so we can understand what is serving and what is not. And I think what you just said is such a big key too, is that's how I found out, that who I was angry at myself for not having those boundaries, for having a lot of that, like feeling like I was walking on eggshells for so long, and understanding why, because I didn't quite understand why. And I think it's also hard when you're dealing with the feeling of those that you love, on where that boundary lies too, on whether or not they're even aware of how they're showing up in life, how that's affected them and the family and at large. A lot of times they're not aware, they're not going to be. And that, I'm not saying that people can't change. We're all about that. That's why we're here. However, as you know, we have to be willing to do our own work. And for those of us that care, we cannot do work for others around us. And I kept,
Amen.
Even, I could never even be a coach today if I also didn't really learn that lesson, that I only work with people who are already on the path, saying, this is where I'm at. I have an awareness that these are some of my self-sabotage, or this is where I'm at, and I'm willing to do the work, because otherwise it's a null and void. There's no point. And that's okay. That's what they're choosing. But growth doesn't work that way. It's an inner job, and it's saying, okay, yes, I've got a segment underneath that part of my book that's the power of no. We talk about, I used to say yes and yes all the time, years and years and years ago back in college, until I realized that I was saying yes all the time, and I couldn't say yes to everyone all the time. And why was it that I was saying yes all the time? I need to say no, and it's okay if people don't like me, right? Oh my goodness, what, people aren't going to like me. It's an awful feeling, right? It's that fear of, they're not going to like it. And most of the time when you start putting up your boundaries, I think we prep people for this, don't we, Heather? Is that people aren't going to like it. You're going to rock the boat, and you have to be ready for that. You really do. But once you're able to get that started, it really becomes so much easier, right? Like you said, and it opens up, like, the amazing people that show up in our lives are people who can handle it, who can meet you. And it's just this amazing feeling of, yeah, this work is meaningful. And here's where I'm at today. It may not be overnight. It may not be in 30 days. It might be in, 12 weeks. It definitely will be in 6 months to a year. You will see the shifts in your life, in the reflections of those around you. Absolutely. 100%.
Oh yeah, completely. And especially one of the thoughts that's often helpful for people when they're like, oh my God, it for real feels like I'm going to die if I say no. Because, we're wired for belonging.
Yes.
And then we mistake fitting in for belonging. So it just feels like I'm just going to lose everything. So one question I like to ask people is, if they're upset that you say no and you're risking the relationship, do you really want to be with people who only want you for what you can do?
No, because when you're realizing that in that moment, you, like I did, wow, people really only want something from you. And it seems like this is a similar pattern. However, I allowed it. I didn't realize I was allowing it. So it's easy for us to point the finger outside until we realize, okay, but since we're two people, there's always something to learn. How am I being a part of this? And most of the time it's that way we're unaware of, hey, we've got the underlying rhetoric, that fear, and also that lack of boundary, or what will happen when I do. And the sooner we get to it, the sooner we can realize, wow, thank God I've made this choice in saying no more. This is the way it is. And this doesn't mean that you're not willing to grow, because you're clearly doing your work. It's also aren't you worth being with somebody who's also choosing to do the same thing? And yes, it's not, as I would say, as we know, there's a smaller percentage. Okay, we do understand that, which also makes it harder, because once you're on the path, it's kind of, you can't really look back. So once you've kind of started your path, it's sometimes, people say ignorance is bliss. And I never really understood it until more recently, where I'm like, well, now I really understand. Like, once you know all this and start to practice all this, you really you have to keep going. There's really no other way,
Exactly. But sometimes people mistake me, and I'm guessing they mistake you as well, in that, when I draw the boundary, then I you tend to lose that relationship. Not always, because I'm guessing you're like me and the people you work with are leaders, whether they realize it or not. So it's an opportunity that helps them when they ask that person, like, okay, it's almost as if you only like me for what I can do, that I don't simply like you for all you can do. Would you like to have a conversation with that? And the people that are like, well, I don't know, that's somebody you can work with. That's somebody who has the real potential to configure and come right along with you. And if they don't, that's okay too. Right. But now it's like, you know where to invest your energy and you know where to invest your time.
And you are so right. What you just said, it's really what you just said right there. You are now choosing, like we talked about before. It's a choice in the moment. And this, again, I think sometimes people separate business and personal relationships. Now, you and I both know there's no separation. So I think it's important to realize whatever's happening in your business is also happening in your personal relationships and vice versa. There's this bleed through, and you will see that shift. Even prior to the new year, let's just give an example during this pandemic and trying to build out some of what I was building out. And in my business, as I was putting down these boundaries and really making some bigger shifts in my life, realizing that there's certain things I'm not going to do anymore out of the self-care, I was shown a great example through a business side of things prior to the new year, right? And I was working on myself so much that even after the new year, I was already attracting different things than I was prior to the new year when I made the plans with this original person, let's just say. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what I realized. I'm the type of person that I like to give the benefit of the doubt. I really do. Okay. I care about people. I think people deserve it. And I think that's important to still do. However, once, twice, 3 times over, there should be we're done. Meaning, don't give somebody too many opportunities to not meet their deliverables. And I felt that that's what I had done. When I knew halfway through that the deliverable was not being met, that's a tongue twister, I should have just said, okay, it's not personal. Thank you so much. It's business. I appreciate this, but this was our agreement. It didn't happen and I have to move forward. I didn't. I gave him another chance, which was that was okay, except for I realized where I went wrong. I took my power back to realize, here's what you could have done. So next time you'll do it different. And by the time I had changed that, the next person I worked with was amazing. I mean, met my deliverables, couldn't be more on par because I had realized in that moment how I was showing up, what my part was, instead of blaming the other person that didn't get it done, right? No. What did I allowed? And then made a different choice and attracted the very person who was not only on met the deliverable, but did it in a bigger, better way that just blew me away. I mean, amazing. So I think that's a great example to catch ourselves. Yeah, to make those changes and then to see how that shows up in our lives because it happens so fast.
Love it. So you saw it, you received the feedback, you reclaimed your power, you acted, you reestablished a boundary, and you did so in a way that did not blame the other party. This doesn't need to be a good or bad situation. Like, this didn't work. May the force be with you.
Yes,
moving on.
No hard feelings.
No big deal. No hard feelings, no big deal. Go forth and be successful elsewhere. Great. Right. And I'm guessing that when you did that in business, that probably opened up things in your personal life. It's also possible that, parking spaces were easier to get and like all this random stuff.
Rockstar parking, of course.
Exactly. You get rockstar parking. You're like, obviously, I must be in the front row. And it's just simply more feedback that is an aligned action for you. And I just love it that you're hearing it, you're listening, you're tuning in, and then you're able to lead and guide others to do the same.
Yes. And this is not just this year, right? This has been for many, many, many years. It's just that this is what I think is important to let people know. It's never ending. So it doesn't matter where you're at now or where you were. If you're committed to your growth, you're always going to have opportunities to see this. It's just that you get better at seeing them. And so things end up manifesting or happening just a little faster, actually, which is the fun part about it, right? You talked about fun earlier, Heather, like, how can we have fun with this? Well, again, it's about the shift in perspective. It is fun when you're realizing that the shifts that you're making are actually showing up bigger, better, faster, and in these moments. And when they're not, that's okay too, because it just gives you another opportunity to go, okay, am I feeling resistance here? Where am I feeling resistance? And it doesn't always have to be. I think people are afraid because there's a fear of having an argument with somebody, right? Fear of expressing what they're going to feel, because people won't always like it. And you're right, they won't. But here's the difference. When you know that you're showing up doing what you believe is the right thing, when you're communicating clearly and irrelevant of relationships, business or not, that you're professional about the communication, you cannot control the way the other person responds, or if they're leadership material, or if they're even aware most of the time of how they're responding. You can only go, okay, that's that. Great. We don't need that. Next. Mm-hmm. You get to choose now and not take it on as it's something about me. I'm wrong. All of this is my fault, right? But that's just not the truth. There is only so much that we can do, which is just our part. And as long as we're honest about how we're showing up in the moment, because sometimes we're not perfect either, then we can gauge that and just say, okay, this person's probably not aware that they only call me whenever they want something just from me, that it's a one-way street. But now that I'm aware of that, I can say thank you for the part that you've played in my life. And I may not say this to, we might not always express this, because let's be honest, Heather, not everybody does allow room for that type of a leadership conversation. They do not. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean you even have to, again, we talk about a season, a reason, a lifetime, right? It's true. Sometimes people come into our lives for whatever reason that is, but it's not forever. And then we tend to notice that it's not working out. And we just need to say, thank you. I'm so grateful for the role that you've played, even if that's inside of inside of us. And then move forward with grace. There doesn't need to be no hard feelings. There's just saying, I am choosing not to have you sit at my table right now.
Yeah. I've
cleared the way for different people to meet me and sit at my table. And that is all about, reclaiming your power.
It is. And when people hear reclaiming your power, I think, at least in the long past, I was like, well, what does that even mean? Does that mean there's going to be a lot of fighting with people to struggle and get it back? No, no, it's actually quite simple. It's just drop what doesn't work for you, pull it back to you, and then make a new choice from that new perspective, that new place, from where you actually are, which is your surrender and accept what is. Yeah. It's just, it can be so elegant, and it doesn't have to burn bridges. Sometimes
no.
It's appropriate, but it doesn't have to be.
No, because you're right. It's not, again, so a big part of, I have the 4 pillars of poise I talk about, and it's presence, power, passion, purpose. However, when we talk about power, since you mentioned reclaiming your power, I actually talk about how I believe that power is, I won't even want to say it's misunderstood, but it's defined differently than the way I see it. And the way I see it is the power is within you, meaning it's not power hungry or we're going to fight, because I have to say, I've got a little spunk in me. I've been known to fight a few things in my life. And I realized that it was about letting go of that. It was about everything that I met with some sort of fight was exactly what then I was attracting. And so, like you said, it's not about the fight or external power. It's about letting go, going within, and reclaiming what you do have control over, so that we are not thinking that somehow we are just playing a role that we have that we're just somehow on a whim here in life. No. You're right. We can't control what is necessarily thrown at us. But again, reclaiming your power is all about, well, how can I then respond, or how do I shift my perspective, or how do I then put the ball in my court with what I can work with, which is where we get the peace that all of us long for. And we wonder how we're getting to that peace. It's not a peace that's every moment of every day. It's a peace that comes with really just being at peace with who you are, first and foremost, and then just trying to stick with that authenticity of that beingness, not the doingness, not the what we're expected to do or what we're taught is more important or what is successful. It's just, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. I'm committed to my growth. Great. It's different than somebody that says, this is who I am and I'm not willing to change, which is a lot of people. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. And that's okay. But we get to choose, how much do we want to spend time with them, and where do they get to sit at the table, or do they not? And that's, again, where the ball is in our court, right? That's where the power, is in our court.
Yeah. And I agree. That is in my opinion, the old way of viewing and seeing power. It's like, I am right. You are wrong. I am inflexible. I have all of the toys. I have all the, whatever. That isn't what it actually is. It's probably not what it never was, but it certainly isn't anymore. That one's coming more from force. This is just a true power. No, this is where I'm at, and I maintain the flexibility. Like when you take in new information, it makes sense. Sometimes that new information is going to change your mind. It's going to change your perspective. That's the vulnerability that you were talking about at the top of the podcast here, and how crucial that is. And then how much strength and fortitude does that require to actually let yourself be vulnerable, let yourself stand amongst all of your beautiful boundaries. And it's just it's the type of power that I find the most attractive, because who doesn't love that? It's powerful, but not inflexible.
Right. And I think this is really important when we circle back around to why that's important now more than anything with what everybody is going through during a pandemic, which is unexpected, is it not? It's adversity, right? It's obstacles. It's things that make us go, huh? Right? Just like you said, that vulnerable space that is uncomfortable. But it's really a courage you're talking about, which is the way I see it. It's extremely courageous. And we all have that ability within ourselves. It is courageous to say, okay, I'm not quite sure. I don't know. And that's okay. And that vulnerability of where we're at, not knowing what tomorrow brings. Let's be clear. We are all in the same boat, period. We don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah.
You can see even from the way this has happened globally and how we've dealt with the issues, we are still unaware. And this is not just the average person. This is the medical field. This is everybody is learning. We're figuring it out as we go. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, that doesn't give us the stability that we want, because again, a shift in our perspective is, hey, we want stability because this makes us comfortable. Absolutely. But if we realize that that's just not the way life works, then already we're moving things in our favor. Because if our expectations are set up right, we're not having, expectations that are really, you can't ever really meet, then you're already cutting yourself some slack. Hey, it's okay to feel this way. And if anybody else is not talking about it, it's because they're not talking about it. That doesn't mean you're the only one feeling the way you're feeling, which is, I'm unsure of how to navigate my life right now. I'm not quite sure if I can go out or go in, or some people have different immune systems and abilities to be out at work versus working at home. People are taking care of loved ones that have autoimmune issues right now. And again, I'm not going to do anything where we're making anything political. I think it's about caring for yourself and your fellow man as if it were yourself, and just doing whatever it is that is helpful to keep us moving forward in the direction that we can hopefully save lives and navigate through all this together. It doesn't always stay this way forever. It's not forever. It's just for now. And I say that to myself a lot. It's the only way I've gotten through this. It's not forever. It's just for now. Even though sometimes for now feels like forever.
Exactly. But so one of the things that you talked about earlier was community and how important community is. Sure. And you may have heard this before, but especially in functional medicine spaces, it's connection is considered a nutrient. And community, when built in a way that really works for you, is so supportive. How are you finding the ability to stay connected and stay in community? And what are some challenges, and what have you noticed is helping yourself or others overcome those challenges?
Sure. I think it's been prior to COVID, like I said, I already had a bit of an issue with a lot of isolation. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't foreign to me, never comfortable. Although a lot of times isolation can be wonderful when we use it to our advantage to go within to do some of the work that we've discussed, which is why for me, I think this is one of the best years I've experienced in a long time. Now, I say that for a reason, because it's all perspective. It's all relative. Because of me fighting for my life for 12 years prior, it has been not easier, although with the tools I've had, the ability for me to really go within and do the extra work and come out and explain and express the vulnerable story so that others can be supported. If COVID hadn't happened, I'm not sure the book or any of it would have actually happened in the timing of the way it did, to give the ability for me to channel this through. And I'm sure there are others that have had the same experience. So I've really taken this time to go above and beyond in my personal work and my growth, to be of service in a way that I didn't expect. I just went with the prompts and my intuitiveness and what was coming through, that it was time to do so. However, I have had moments, especially I would say over the last even 6 weeks, maybe because I can feel the shift in the collective and what's happening globally and it getting heavier again with the Delta variant and things coming up around that, I've been feeling more stuck than I ever have been a bit, inside. And also, I found this year, I've also lost some people in my life by choice, even this year, when I realized I'm grateful, but that maybe those friendships were really not solid. And I'm really guessing and knowing that so many people I've spoken to have had the same issue, meaning it has brought us closer on many levels, even though we feel like it's, that we're now just doing this, via Skype or Zoom or whatever. I think there's also been a time for us to really realize what's important in our lives. When you have not had this experience before and you've been losing people now that you love and you care for, I think many of us have taken a step back to go, wait a second, what's important here? Because when everything goes crazy and haywire like this and we lose people, what we think is important, like a cappuccino or to get on, social media, really is not what's important. It's about your life in the moment. Have you told those people around you that you love them? The people around you, are they showing up to say, hey, how are you? Are you getting phone calls? I didn't get a lot. Interesting. Why was that? I could say a lot of things as to why that was, but I was so used to being the one to reach out to others to ask them how they are, how they're doing. And I've taken actually a backseat to step back a lot from that. That's been my personal choice because I've realized that, again, I'm deserving of being met where there's an equal give and take, that my cup is overflowing when I give, that I'm not giving from an empty cup, and that there's people who care, are the ones actually checking in, are the ones that are upstanding in their character, who I want to have sit at my table. And so that's my personal experience. Others may have had it look a little different. I don't think there's one way to go about this, but I do think it's just more of giving yourself, not being so hard on yourself first and foremost, which in turn helps us dealing with others, not being so hard on others during a time where so many, I think, are doing the best they can with their lives being turned upside down, to have the compassion and understanding, irrelevant of what family member or what relationship may or may not be toxic. It's just understanding that everybody's doing the best with what they're able to do or the awareness that they have in the moment. What are you choosing? How are you choosing to show up? And really just giving yourself that grace, giving yourself that, I feel this way in the moment, I'm overwhelmed. And no, I do not like it. But it's okay, even if we don't think it's okay. And if we, reach out to community, we do so with those that we feel we have a safe place with, and not everybody feels that they do though. Yeah. And I think that's where the strength comes from, realizing that there's a higher power outside of ourselves. And when I say that, it doesn't matter what your religion is, what your belief is, it's all good. It's just something more than just you, your higher self, if that's what that is, the universe, God, whatever that is for you, to really tap in and tune in and trust on a level that you've never trusted before. Because I will have to tell you that a big part of why I'm here is because of that very thing that maybe I thought I had control over or that I could do. That when I had to surrender or let go or not know how things were going to happen, how I was going to feed myself. And there's so many reasons that I was shown the way, that I was held, that miracles, again, is not something that just parts the seas, right? I think we have this perception that that's what a miracle is. No, miracles happen every moment of every day if we know where to look, if we're looking in the right places, if we realize that, again, we had an interaction with somebody and that made their day and vice versa. That was the miracle today. That was the miracle. Okay. And I think that that's what's important, is staying in gratitude for what it is we do have. Did you eat today? Do you have a roof over your head today? You may have heard this before, but I think so many of us, and especially if we're living in the United States, are not always aware of how rich we are. And when I say rich, I mean not just in our physical things that we have, which is also very big, okay, in this country, but also the people around us. How rich are you? Be grateful for what it is you have, because so many people don't have that. They didn't have that before COVID, and they don't have that now in other parts of the country. I spoke to somebody in rural India who found my book and was in tears and prayed to God. And it was the most amazing conversation, who could barely get internet when we spoke. How grateful we are for the fact that you and I can speak right now and have full internet. These are little things that are big things. And if we shift our perspective and stay in gratitude, that is one of the biggest ways I believe that we can get through what it is we're going through right now is, get out of the ego, cut yourself some slack, which then in turn does that for your fellow human beings. Because what we and how we are to ourselves is what we reflect and how we, show up in our relationships.
It's beautiful and powerful. Love that.
Thank you.
Adena, what's it mean to you to be unshakable?
And that's such a great question because I love your podcast. The unshakable being, when you first reach out, I thought, how wonderful that, again, I am in alignment with attracting the most amazing, wonderful people. You and your work that you're doing, Heather, is wonderful. It's just an honor to be here with you today, that you've just taken the time to connect with me. And what does it mean to be unshakable? Again, I think very much, this is what I'd like to attest this to, like we did in the beginning of the thing, is that there's a Zen proverb that says, obstacles are the path. And I say that because I still believe that the only way out is through. So to be unshakable is not to avoid going through the storm. It's to find peace amidst the storm. So one of my most best quotes that I love is, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. And I say that like it lights me up even as I say it, because that's been my life. Like that is my experience and everything I shared with you as to what the adversity, what adversity I've dealt with and gone through long before COVID, is that I couldn't wait for the storm to pass to live, because all I had was the moment. And I didn't know if I was going to live the next moment. There were so many times, about 3 times over, that I just thought that I wasn't going to be here. We knew that I was about to leave. And I'm still here. So there has to be a reason, right? And that reason, and all I can think about, is to show up and be of service. If that is the reason why we are here, irrelevant. So to be unshakable means to bend, to be flexible, like we talked about before. How important adaptability is, that we have to bend with the wind like the bamboo does, right? That we're not going to be completely blown over or cracked in half. Sometimes, every once in a while, we feel that way and it may look that way. The important thing is that we get back up. That I could have, and there was a moment where I think a lot of people might feel this way too. There was a dark night of the soul moment that was so deep that I actually felt, and it wasn't from an emotional place. It was from an actual, almost like a left brain aspect that said, look, I'm not even surviving. I'm merely existing. So it makes sense that maybe that I'm not here, meaning it wasn't from an emotional space that I've never given up a day in my life. And you can tell that from my personality of who it is I am. It's just that in that moment, it almost made more sense to me. And I just want to speak to anybody that may be feeling that way right now, because I know that there truly is, in all honesty, there are a lot of people feeling that way. Please realize that there is a reason that you may not see right now in the moment. That through all the horrific pain that you may be feeling emotionally, spiritually, physically, even when you can't get that relief, there is a reason. There were things that got me through. There were people and examples that I just looked to. There were friends that I even lost that brought me joy, that I said, you know what, the picture's going to be on my altar. And in the moment of my darkness, I'm going to wake up to this picture, to this woman who was in joy all the time to get me through, whatever that is for you. Being unshakable means how are we dealing with what we are being dealt with in the moment? It's just showing up, that you keep showing up, that you get back up if you're knocked down, and that you can be more adaptable to sway with the storm, with the rain, sometimes dance in it if you need to, because all we have is that moment. So I hope that, even though that's not a direct answer, it's more of a feeling for me. As you can see, I'm an I feel person. Mm-hmm. That's what being unshakable means. It's just to keep showing up and to be that example. I'm still here. I'm still living. If I'm still alive and I'm still standing, you can too. And I can say that now. It's not just hearsay. It's not just, I'm just saying this because it's something you've heard before. I absolutely know in my heart that is absolutely possible, and that you have everything that you need inside you that you can tap into to give you all the tools necessary to get through anything that you're getting through, and come out to the other side filled with actually gratitude and compassion and a whole bunch of tools that you have been wielded. Like we said, grace under pressure. You have found your grace under pressure. And anytime something else comes up, you're realizing you're able to handle it more gracefully, and people even acknowledge that you are. And the only thing you have to say to that, like I did when somebody said, wow, I'm really amazed how gracefully you handled this, was me laughing going, oh, that's great. It's because I've been here before, because I've done something like this before, because I've been through so much angst before, that I can now show up a little bit more graceful because I've been wielded, because I've been through the storm. And I'm not afraid to still be in the storm, even if I do not like it, because I don't. Let's be honest. Come on. It's just that I also know the gifts that come with going through the storm, and what that, when we've got this beautiful calm after the storm, when you smell that rain or you see that sun peeking through, there's this silver lining all the time. It's just, again, about shifting our perspective to actually see that the sun is shining through. And that has really made all the difference as to why I'm still here. So thank you for just having this amazing, Unshakeable Being podcast, and for just being present, so present with me today in all of my emotion, expression, and passion on this subject.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for coming on. This is truly delightful, and I want to be sure that people can find you. Where, if people are like, I need this book, I need to know more about her, where can they go?
Sure. So a couple things. Let's just read to the book first and foremost. It's called The Road Back to Me: 9 Principles for Navigating Life's Unexpected Twists and Turns. So that's available pretty much in every format: ebook, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook as we speak, on all online platforms where books are sold. But I think the most important thing is, if anybody really wants to understand a little bit more of the work that I do, how they can get more support with the Unbreakable Spirit community, as well as through the book and the courses, just go to adenasampson.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have enjoyed this immensely. This has been such a joy for me.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you again so much, Heather, for having me. I really, really enjoy your energy, your vibration, everything you bring to the table. And I'm just so happy I could be here serving you and your audience today.
Thanks so much for listening. I'd love to hear from you. Go to unshakablebeing.com and submit your question, comment, or topic request. May you be unshakable, unstoppable, and vibrant again. Until next time.